Hello and welcome to Writers Showcase. I'm excited to be here. First off, allow me to welcome my usual co-host, Neph Champion.
行くわよ来世の試練よ
Hello, everyone.
Yep.
Good afternoon.
Yep. Her and our resident bard here, Ard, in the background will be providing feedback. They won't be reading stuff quite yet, but they will be providing feedback for the other people. Anyway, let's speaking of which, let's bring our friend Tara.
我が力我が刃我が狂気我が狂気をもて見解せよエクスはあうがせエクスプロージョン
That cat.
Bring out the peasants so I may put them in their place.
That cat. Oh my god, I love that cat.
Yeah. There was a slight mix-up this week because we've kind of had the same people over and over again, and I just forgot to update the roster in the guest room. So here we go. We also have our resident Beardy McBearderson, Carl Saylor.
Hey folks, I'm back.
Hello.
Hello, Carl.
Only.
Welcome back, Carl.
Yep. Let me see. This is actually like I'm just looking through what I have. I don't have very much. So I guess
That's right, folks. We got some new faces this week.
Yeah,
We do. I'm
Yeah.
Step right up,
excited.
folks. We got some new faces. We got some brand new sights to see. I can't ad lib on this thing any longer.
I guess Aspiring Writer, this is the perfect one.
The actual ethical system that you should all follow is nihilism. The world is empty. There is no point to anything, and you're just gonna die. So do whatever.
That was perfect.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I was kind of hoping Dunn would play the one with, I don't remember if it was Quentin or whoever, but saying, if you don't like it, then I don't want to be friends with you.
Oh, that's Patrick Willem.
That's
That's Will.
Patrick Willem.
Couldn't remember the name.
Thank you for not playing that one on me.
Oh, Becca, no, that's not fair.
Yes.
New people.
Yes, I am the newest person on here, considering Wessia had his stuff read last time.
Well, Becca's already calling for your removal, so.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
I-
Who's calling for my removal?
I had a late night playing Alpha, trying to beat my head against the stupid Balefamil Earth mod. It sucks.
The mod or you?
The mod.
Oh.
The mod is really frustrating to work with.
Well,
But
I'm going to be honest with you right now, Dunn. It sounds like, you haven't even gotten to play. It's not working.
I have. Oh, I have. It's just that the mod is buggy.
Oh, I thought you meant it was hard.
Oh, yeah. Well, we also have a third member of, sixth. I can't count. I'm tired. Anyway, allow us to bring in the final guest. This is the best I could come up with.
Sheer willpower, Ninja.
All right.
Hello.
Short and sweet.
That was
Hello.
I wouldn't mind if there was nothing at all. So
Well,
Yeah, next time we'll come
Yeah.
prepared with our own intros.
I mean, I'll have
Yeah.
to try to figure out something, but you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, unironically. Well, I wasn't playing games. I was sleeping. I stayed. I was played a little of Age of Empires, and I was also trying to beat my head against the install, like trying to get the final mod for Battlefield Earth updated, but for whatever reason, like it's not finding the right file so that it will run, and it's just so frustrating. Yeah. And also, I've been waiting for months to play this game, so I'm just like, I want to play it. I want to play it. Yeah. Anyway, so here's how it's gonna work. So, Neph, me, and Tarek will be like providing feedback. And our friends, I think Carl Saylor will be reading Mothmaster first, then Aspiring Writer, then Wizia, and then we'll goes back to Carl to read Mothmasters. I think, or was it Carl reads his, Aspiring Writer reads his, Wizia reads his, and then back to Carl Saylor so he can read
the other one he's
Mothmasters.
been asked to read.
Yeah. Yeah. That way we give him time to rest his voice.
Mm-hmm.
I can do that.
Alrighty. Shall we start off with you?
Very well then. So, as you may remember, 2 weeks ago, I promised you the Hitler speech. And, and I hope I shall not disappoint. Let us begin.
Not really. I need it.
Oh boy.
Oh dear.
Alrighty.
Well, now then. All at once, the muffled hum of the crowd thickened into a blanket of sound that lay heavy across Hobart's face. Below the balcony, Queen Helen's Square was more crowded than he had ever seen it. Not a speck of cobblestone could be seen beneath the roiling mass of humanity. And they've all come out to see us, Hobart thought. Well, to see Percy, that is. The announcements of a public address from the Dawn Palace had been circulating in the broadsheets for nearly a week. There were considerable expectations to be met. As for Lord Stolos himself, Hobart watched as his friend strode confidently to the edge of the balcony as a great wave of sound washed over him. For a moment he gazed out across the crowd and raised his hand to call for silence. Lord Newton wheeled a large wooden lectern in front of Lord Stolos, and a hush settled over the crowd. We're just getting the last few circuits connected up now, Lord Newton said. Now then, Percy, have you ever used a magniphone before? I don't believe I have, Percy admitted. All right, Lord Newton pointed to a small metal button suspended from wires at the top of a center of a glass hemisphere, which was itself suspended above the lectern on a protruding crane-like arm. You speak into the magnification head here. Try to keep your mouth about a handspan away, and if you start hearing a ringing sound, don't worry, that's just feedback. Just give it a moment for the noise to settle down. Other than that, you should be fine. We'll be ready for you in just a moment. I'll give you the signal. Lord Newton retired to join a pair of his aides at a large wooden control panel covered in switches and dials. And sure enough, after a second or two, a loud pop echoed through the square, like the sound of a large wine bottle opening, followed by a sudden flurry of gasps from the crowd below. Surely the noise of an audio circuit engaging was an alien sound to most of the common rabble. Some might even take it for a distant artillery shell. Hobart watched as Percy warily approached the lectern, spread his speech upon the surface, taking great care to set the thin metal paper clamps in place at the corners. It was still mid-morning, and the wind shouldn't pick up for some time yet, but this high up one could never be too cautious. The sound of Percy clearing his throat filled the city, and the last of the conversation below flickered out. Fellow citizens, Lord Stolos began, thank you for joining me this... He barely got through his first sentence before being interrupted by a large metallic shriek, like a child dragging a wet finger over the edge of the largest crystal wine glass in the world. Stolos quickly leaned away for a moment to let the racket dissipate. Thank you for joining me this morning, he continued more cautiously. I am Lord Perseus Hiram Stolos, and by the consensus of my fellow lords, I have been appointed Lord Protector of Aurora. Doubtless to many of you this will seem a strange development, and I can hardly fault you. Had I been told a fortnight ago what sort of madness was to be visited upon us, had I known that Hadvari soldiers would strike us at the very heart of our realm, that they would take the life of our dearly beloved Queen Cassandra herself, I should have condemned it as an impossible fiction, if not outright sedition. And yet, it happened nonetheless, and it must be reckoned with. And just who is responsible for this infamous act of wanton treachery? Surely there are those who merit a measure of the blame. The foreign plotters who orchestrated the attack, the enemy soldiers who carried it out, our own soldiers who failed to foil the enemy, be they perfidious or merely incompetent. These guilty parties shall of course be rooted out and brought to justice in their turn. But in a deeper sense, the ones that are truly responsible are all too clear. Hobart lowered his vision to the crowd as Lord Stolos paused for theatrical effect. He wanted to see how the people would receive Percy's little rhetorical twist. It is us, Lord Stolos said. We are all responsible. Every last one of us. Below him, the crowd began to simmer with uncertain conversation. And how could we not be? Lord Stolos continued, a touch of passion beginning to creep into his voice. As a people, we are grown complacent. This world is a perilous one, and it grows more so with each passing day. And yet we laze about in indolence, going about the trifling affairs of our little lives, thinking ourselves safe behind our mountain shield, while hordes of enemies spy us out with envious eyes and hateful hearts. Our love of comfort and easy living has blinded our eyes to the peril that stalks us from beyond our sovereign borders. But what of our recently concluded war against Hadvar, one might well ask? True, for nearly 30 years we fought to defend ourselves and our way of life against the encroaching western peril, and a great many deeds of valor and renown were seen in the doing of it. And yet, how many of those here can truly say they played any part, by the great or small, in this undertaking? For an endeavor of almost 3 decades, I'd say the number is far too few. The sorry truth is that we too often have taken the security of our lands for granted. Too many of us have regarded the news of faraway battles and the distant thunder of war as mere entertainment, something to be mused about at tea, over breakfast, like the small doings of some local gentleman's sporting club. Can we truly be shocked that such an attitude has bred a generation of complacent fools? And so thus has it ever been. Time and again we lash out with but a fraction of our slumbering might, and as soon as we content ourselves with a few meager triumphs, we shrink back into domestic tranquility, with the larger portion of the work still left undone. One might well compare us to a witless beast, swatting away a stinging fly, with no heed to the venomous nest from whence it came, and within which more are spawning at this very moment. Sooner or later we shall be overcome in a storm, and our descendants will curse our names for not stopping it when we had the chance. It is long past time for this pattern of isolation to be put aside for good. This world must be made safe for civilization, and we must be the ones to make it so. And the first thing to be done towards this end is to bring Hadvar to reckoning for the atrocity they have visited upon our soil, and to make certain that they shall never again be able to commit such offenses against our people and our nation. By now the crowd below was a seething cauldron of rage. Hobart could see the people raising their fists and howling in anger, and at least once he heard a woman cry out, "Treacherous ginks!" The propaganda was working beautifully. A few twists of rhetoric, and Percy could have this mob charging across the borders of Hadvar itself. But let us not be so hasty yet to beat the drums of war, Lord Stolos said, appearing to restrain his passion. We are not a bloodthirsty race. We have no desire that the less fortunate nations of the world should suffer needlessly. And besides, we all know the Hadvari bureaucracy to be clumsy and sluggish. Such is the fate of those nations that spurn the gifts of modernity. Let us lead with charity and afford Hadvar an opportunity to demonstrate their contrition, if they so choose. Lord Stolos slipped the paper clips aside and held up the paper upon which his speech was printed. To this end, I have drafted here an ultimatum to be set before Hadvar. The 8 points of this ultimatum, which I trust we shall all deem most reasonable given the circumstances, are as follows. Item the first. An official admission of culpability and wrongdoing for the murder of Queen Cassandra II, beloved of God and supreme ruler of Aurora and all the provinces, and a pledge to make reparations for the said crime upon terms to be negotiated by the Auroran government at a later junction. Item the second. A pledge of perpetual non-aggression towards the Annalarian Protectorate, with all Hadvari combat troops to be immediately and unconditionally withdrawn to positions not closer than 200 kilometers due west of the present-day Armistice Line. Item the third. Recognition of Auroran hegemony over the city of Freeport, as a component part of the Annalarian Protectorate. Item the fourth. Auroran observers to sit upon the ruling councils of Hadvar at multiple levels of bureaucracy in the interest of transparency in governance. Item the fifth. Auroran officials to be granted authority to investigate the plot to murder Queen Cassandra II, titles, etc., upon Hadvari territory, with the culprits to be remanded in extradition that they may stand trial before an Auroran court of justice upon identification and apprehension. Item the sixth. The immediate cessation of production and propagation of all harmful propaganda and rhetoric against the Auroran government, people, or culture, to be replaced with material of a nature more conducive to international reconciliation. Item the seventh. The prompt removal from positions of prominence, control, and authority of any and all individuals who have expressed views indicating hostility towards the Auroran government, people, or culture. And item the eighth. Prompt notification of the accession to the above terms and execution of the obligations therein. Lord Stolos set the paper back down with a theatrical flair. These are our terms. We are willing to have peace with our Western neighbors, but it must be a peace with honor. 2 months we shall give them to respond, in order that their taciturn bureaucracy may have time to fully process this matter. If they refuse, however, or if no response shall have been received by this deadline, then I may assure you the consequences for Hadvar shall be dire indeed. In the meanwhile, let us steel our resolve as a people, for we may soon find ourselves called into the service of a great and noble cause. It is not the cause of one individual or class of individuals, not even the cause of this nation, but the cause of civilization itself. In this mighty undertaking, every man and woman must stand ready to play their part. If we fail, we shall be utterly undone as a nation and a people, cast down and shattered into pieces to be picked over by the victorious savages from beyond our borders. But if we succeed, if we manage to unite in service to this greater ideal and overcome the vast powers arrayed against us, then we shall win for ourselves and our children the bright and glorious promise of a golden age to come. A new day is dawning upon us, fellow citizens. Let us rise to meet it. I thank you for your time. Lord Stolos bowed and stepped away from the magnaphone as a tremendous thunder of adulation erupted forth from the square. With Lord Stolos's performance concluded, Hobart and the rest of the retinue crowded around the wooden panel where Lord Newton and his aides stood, still fussing over the switches and dials. And that should do it, Newton said, flicking one final switch into the off position. It is now safe to disconnect and disassemble the equipment. So the radio broadcast is complete then? Lord Stolas asked, sounding very impressed. Oh no, the broadcast proper hasn't actually started yet, Lord Kalstrom explained. This was a recording, you see. I'm afraid an actual live broadcast would require a certain level of infrastructure which has yet to be constructed at this location. The next step is to take the recorded speech to my pilot site outside Blackpool, where the broadcast will be actually conducted. Once the general concept has been demonstrated, we may proceed from there. Fascinating, Lord Stolas nodded. Well, since you seem to know what you are about, I'll leave it to you then. As Lord Stolas turned to go, Kalstrom called out, Incidentally, my lord, I should like to have words with you at some point about installing that broadcast infrastructure. All in due time, Aaron, Lord Stolas said, without looking back. Hobart followed Percy off the balcony and back into the Dawn Palace. The deafening roar of the crowd faded again to a whisper as the glass door closed behind them, and Hobart released a tense breath that he hadn't noticed he'd been holding in. Controlling a crowd was a most useful ability, yet it called for a degree of confidence under pressure that Hobart quite simply did not possess. So, what did you think of that, Bart? Percy asked, making a direct line to the liquor cabinet. Well, I must say you were a deft hand over the mess, Miss Percy, Hobart said. What do you really think? Stolas lowered his voice as the pair of crown glasses before him filled up with brandy. Hobart glanced back out the glass doorway. The rest of the group was still out on the balcony, clustering around Lord Newton and his magnificent recording device. A swift glance about the rest of the chamber assured Hobart that Percy and he were alone. They could speak in confidence. That ultimatum of yours is completely stillborn, Hobart said. Each one of those points is a complete non-starter. Items 6 and 7 aren't even practically enforceable. I can guarantee you the Ginks won't accept a single letter of it. It's not meant to be accepted, Percy smiled, a wicked smile. It's meant to provide a pretext. That way we can engage in military action while still presenting ourselves as the aggrieved party. Presenting ourselves to whom exactly? Hobart said. The Ginks surely won't be convinced, and Issachar isn't in a position to make much of a difference either way. Who are we trying to persuade again? Why, the Auroran people, of course, Percy said, passing one of the crown glasses to Hobart. Once the deadline runs out, or a rejection comes back, the population shall take it as a slight. It'll be that much easier to convince them to volunteer for duty, or sign up for war work once they feel they have some skin in this game. Not if they believe it to be an empty gesture, Hobart said. People don't like being slighted, yes, but they like being manipulated even less. Percy hesitated. You make a good point, Bart. We'll need to exert close control over how this matter is discussed in the broadsheets, to make sure nobody catches on or unweaves the little tapestry. I'll be sure to have words with Lords Downing and Alaban on the matter. We'll need them to keep their news journals on a close lead. And what about the independent broadsheets? Hobart asked. Newport Today, the Queen's Messenger, the Marburg Financial Daily. Some of those are rather prominent. You intend to go door to door and browbeat each editor into compliance, one after the other? I take your point, Percy nodded. This is too large an undertaking for a single person to handle. And in any case, it's probably going to require a continuous effort to maintain. An Office of Public Censorship. That ought to do the trick. That won't work, Hobart said. A public body would only give away the game. Then we'll keep it secret, Percy said. Give the organization a vague enough name and charter, have it report directly to me and my advisors, keep all of its activities out of the spotlight, and if anyone protests, we can cite wartime security as the reason. Seems like rather a bit much just to keep a few bloody news journals alive, Hobart said. Percy shrugged. Well, among other things, a Directorate of Special Services and Priorities could be useful for any number of applications. He emptied his glass of brandy. Why don't we put you in charge of that, Bart? Me? Well, why not? Percy smiled. I've come to rely upon your counsel a great deal in these past few weeks. May as well make the arrangement official. Besides, it'll do you good to finally have a bit of authority hereabouts. Hobart's eyes flickered to the liquor cabinet where the hidden listening device lurked in the lower drawer. Lucille would be listening in by now. She and the other servants of the Franklin household could serve as a steady core for a new clandestine organization. And with the state bureaucracy in the process of expanding for wartime, a host of prospective candidates would soon be presenting themselves for interviews. Hobart's hand wandered up to his suit pocket where the crumbled yellow telegrams slumbered. A decent measure of authority would be a soothing boon. It would help him to start thinking of himself as Lord Franklin after all. That way he could finally confront that confounded upstart with a full dignity expected of someone at his station. Yes, I think I might be able to manage that, Hobart said at length. And you know, he was almost starting to believe it. There we go.
The hype is real.
Yeah, it is.
That was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Where do I sign up? I'm ready to fight whoever the hell you tell me to.
That speech was great.
That was very convincing.
Yeah. I mean, I can almost see it, even.
What, the Nazi rally?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Just replace the Star of Dawn with a different geometric shape. Change up the color scheme a bit.
All right.
Yeah.
I see what's
Well,
going on over there.
I knew this was a Hitler speech, so I could. It's a very, very good Hitler speech.
Yeah.
I mean, he was known for being a very good orator, so you know.
Yeah, it's unfortunate he was evil.
Yes.
Yes, that's a pretty good description of everyone. Who's a lot of people actually.
Anyone who gives a speech is immediately evil.
Unfortunately.
So basically
Maybe.
everybody on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
That would include us, since we're also on YouTube.
Yes.
Hmm,
Yes, we're all,
Hey.
I suppose.
you have to be a psychopath to be on YouTube, mate. You have to be.
Well, technically, I'm not on YouTube. I'm technically on Streamlabs, but it's being streamed over to YouTube. So, you know, I'm one step removed from being evil. So that's
Well,
good for me.
I have done YouTube,
One degree
unfortunately,
of
so I'm psychotic.
Huh. Has anybody told you that you kind of sound like Jason Chewy Slate from the Manipool aspiring writer?
I have no idea who you just said or what you're trying to reference.
He's a School of Movies regular.
Oh no.
Wow, he's his first time here, and you insult him.
Done! How dare you?
Wait, what was that an insult? I don't know.
It was.
The movies is like really, really bad.
Well, you see, I couldn't understand where the offense was because I've never heard of this guy before. So,
Me too.
Well, he's one of the least bad guests.
Least bad is still bad.
oh boy, that fever's coming back.
Well,
so have you? Okay, so you're familiar with Just Right and Patrick Willems, right?
I am, yes.
They're worse.
Well, yeah, the two are morons.
Yeah.
I mean,
like they're dumber than they are.
I noticed, mate.
I mean, here's all I'm gonna say. I don't need EFAP or Mahler to tell me that Patrick Willems and Just Right have gone down the drain because.
Like School of Movies is worse than Patrick Willems or Just Right.
Oh,
Yes.
crap.
Yes, they are.
I have never heard of these people.
Well, it's an obscure 2-hour
Oh,
podcast
you-
series. Like their
You
Last Jedi
lucky
podcast,
soul.
Their Last Jedi podcast was painful to listen to.
How long did it take us to get through those 2 hours again? Like 8 hours? No, way more than 8 hours.
Their podcast was only 2 hours? My god. We need to up that number up by a lot.
And it took
oh yeah,
4 sessions to get through it.
Might have been 5.
Wow, that must have been a fun time.
Oh, it was. The first 30 minutes was a CinemaSins rant that was ultimately pointless.
At least we got the rancor of progressiveness out of it.
Yeah. I mean,
unironically, that's an actual line that he used, as if he were being philosophically deep.
Yeah, or they were trying to. Never mind the fact the rancor dies.
Yeah. One of these days I'll have to have y'all on to experience School of Movies.
I've already been on School of Movies with you.
I am looking forward to it.
I need to see. I need to see what you mean by how they sound like me. I need to know this now.
I guess I'll have to pick. I know he's on Black Panther, the Black Panther one, so maybe we'll do that one next. Oh yes, the meme of the pansexual raccoon was invented on the Wonder Woman 1984 show.
Oh yeah, it was. It was, yeah.
Brilliant.
Pansexual raccoon. What nonsense? What nonsense do you guys get up to on here? I've been missing out.
Oh, just what the.
Did we do the Jurassic Park one, or
their Jurassic Park one is fine.
Okay, so
they just think, like, maybe Treasure Planet, but they like mostly like that movie with the exception of Ben, and they kind of think the Lake Jim is a little bit bland.
Everyone mostly likes that movie with the exception of Ben. How is that controversial?
I don't know.
Yeah.
And Jim is.
I don't know. I don't think so. Which Jurassic Park stream? I don't think it really did. The one that really ruffled feathers was frickin' confused Matthew stands were really annoyed. I did that one. That was 6 hours.
Yeah, but it took us forever to get through it because it's like, no, Matthew, you're not watching this movie correctly.
It's a shame that we live in an age, in an era, and in a society where people don't know how to watch films.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Well, when I said we live in an age, my brain immediately thought, say we live in a society. But why do it?
You should have said that.
That's immediately what I thought you were going to. I thought that was the entire point.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
Yep. Alrighty. I believe it is the aspiring writer's turn.
Oh, happy days. I get to read now. Life is great. Everything is perfect. Life is great. Everything is perfect. Life is great. Everything is perfect. These thoughts repeated over and over through her head, forced through her mind as she worked. She knelt down to pick up another rock, nearly a third her size. Hefting it up, she started walking through the Golden City, shining skyscrapers on either side of her, the street a work of art. Time passed quickly for her, and as she set down the rock carefully with the other, something compelled her to eat. She walked over to where the food was laid and sat down, about to bite in, when she gasped. Her head suddenly throbbed in pain, and her vision seemed to split. She saw what she normally saw, a grand city, golden and shining, buildings high enough to block the sky. But now beyond that, she saw something else. A vast expanse of orange-red ground leading up to black mountains. Dust, ash, and other particles filled the air, obstructing her vision and tickling her throat and lungs. She looked at what she was eating. In the Golden City, whenever she had tried to focus on it, it would simply blur further. But now, in her other vision, she could make out that it was some kind of meat. She looked up and noticed what she was eating the meat from. There was a body, humanoid, with orange skin and red hair, and far larger than her. She glanced around and noticed that there were others eating with her, other orange people, like the corpse she was eating from. She took a bite of the meat and found it was incredibly hard to chew. Her face scrunched up as she registered the odd taste. Had she been eating this every day? She scooped up some black liquid that had been puddled next to her to wash out the taste. She grimaced as she gulped it down. It tasted like ash and burned her throat. The throbbing in her head got worse and her mind started to clear. And then the questions came. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing here? Why am I eating this person? Why was I happy before? What's my name? Why am I here? All of the bodies and ash suddenly hit her and she doubled over. For the first time, she noticed how hard it was to breathe and she started coughing as she tried to take another breath. Her body was covered with sweat from the heat, causing ash and dust to stick to her. She jumped as she heard a loud snap from the orange person next to her, who had broken off a limb from the body they were eating. As they took a bite, blood sprayed out, some of which hit her face. Looking down, she thought that she wore a sleeveless top that was peppered with holes and stained orange by the dust covering the ground. She lifted her hands, which were brown, not orange. They were riddled with scrapes and cuts from the rocks she carried, and coated with a layer of grime, dust, and blood. She didn't know if it was the blood of the person she was eating or her own. Some of her hair slipped off her shoulders, long enough that the ends laid in her hands. She pushed her hair back and looked behind her. Large cracks in the ground created tunnels from which the orange people marched out of, carrying rocks as big as her over their shoulder toward an outpost in the distance. The orange people did not register her as they passed. They just continued on, their eyes glazed over as they marched. They looked frail and starved, their ribs visible. What sustained her was barely enough to keep them alive. Watching them while they marched were people in golden armor, an object in their hands which they kept close to their chest. They were small, like her, yet the way they held themselves made them somehow more intimidating than the giants they watched over. She spotted only 3, all facing away from her, oblivious to her unusual behavior. The throbbing in her head got worse, and she cried out, clutching her skull in pain. The golden people turned to her, finally noticing the commotion. The pain stopped. Everything made sense again. Life was great. Everything was perfect. Life is great. Everything is perfect. Life is great. Everything is... Her head ached, and the trance broke again. She grimaced as a deafening sound of drilling smothered her, but resisted the urge to cover her ears. While there weren't any of the golden ones down the tunnel, she had to keep her reactions to a minimum. They seemed to be able to sense when she was distressed and would put her back in the trance. If she was honest to herself, though, she almost preferred the trance and the numbness that came along with it. At least then she didn't have to see the horror of her situation. The moments of clarity seemed to be happening more frequently, though it was hard to tell the passing of time when she was in that state. At each break, she had to force herself to not react to avoid the tension of the golden ones and retain her clarity longer, because despite the pain and the horror of clarity, she preferred it to not having control over her own mind. Most of the time, she would awake while she was carrying rocks to the outpost to be forced to endure the strain on her body until it was her time to sleep, where she'd then be put back into the trance. This time, she woke while waiting in the tunnels, where the orange people, who she now knew were called borons, were using mining equipment to drill a vein of some gray mineral. Broken chunks of the mineral were piled next to them for other borons to pick up and carry to the outpost for processing and refining. She hesitated. That last bit was new. She didn't know what happened to the minerals the last time her trance broke. She didn't even know what processing and refining were. The boron in front of her picked up a large chunk of rock and hefted it onto their shoulder before marching off, and she found herself at the front of the line. She scanned the large mineral pile and picked up one of the smaller chunks, lifting it up to her waist, and starting down the line that led out of the tunnel. As she marched, something in the corner of her eye caught her attention. She turned to look and saw a new face. In one of her moments of clarity, she had found out the species she belonged to was called human, and had seen a few others of her kind march past her. This one, however, clearly was not human. While short like her, he had skin that was pure white under the dust and grime covering it. His hair, which reached a little below the shoulders, seemed to be gray or silver, though the orange dust standing it made it somewhat difficult to tell. She leaned down to check his eyes. His head was bowed like the surrounding borons, to see if he was in the trance. His eyes were glazed over, confirming he was in the trance, but she forgot about that as she realized his eyes were red. Everything but his pupils were a shade of red, the majority the color of blood, and the irises a shade lighter. She hadn't seen anyone like this, though she had probably walked past him when she was in the trance. He passed her and she continued forward, unwilling to see what happened if she stepped out to the line. While the Golden Ones hadn't done more than put her back into trance, she feared they would eventually do something worse if she made too many disruptions. She exited the tunnel out onto the rocky plains. She stumbled as she felt an intense wave of heat, her vision blurring. The tunnel had been far cooler than it was out in these fields of orange. She forced herself to keep going, careful to watch her footing. Keeping her head down, she spotted two of the Golden Ones, watching them with their blue thin eyes as they passed. She shrank away slightly. Those glowing eyes unnerved her. She looked down at what they were holding and searched her mind. She was glad to find plasma arms, a weapon that made to shoot plasma in concentrated bolts. She tried to search her mind for more information, but came up blank. She scowled inside, frustrated. She always felt that no matter how much knowledge she acquired, there was always something she didn't know, something just beyond her grasp. One of the Golden Ones turned toward her suddenly. She froze for a moment before realizing her mistake. She held her breath as she continued forward, hoping the Golden One hadn't noticed her pause. The other one turned to her, and they both started walking to her. She shut her eyes as they approached. However, the trance never came. She opened her eyes and saw the Golden Ones had passed her. They were looking up at something, clearly agitated. She looked up to see what had made the Golden One so concerned. She couldn't see anything out of the ordinary, just red clouds covering the sky. After a while, she could make out something moving, or several things, moving very fast, and moving toward them. As they got closer, she was shocked to find she knew what they were. Starships. 5 large ships with bulky backs at the head, and several smaller, slimmer craft following behind. And the smaller craft were firing at the larger ones. She dropped the trunk she was carrying. Those ships were heading toward them, and they were being fired upon. This was the first thing the presence in her mind didn't tell her how to handle. This wasn't something under the Golden One's control. This wasn't meant for her to deal with. What was she supposed to do? Before she could decide, one of the ships missed their target and the plasma discharge exploded to the ground near her, knocking her off her feet. She laid there, her mind numb and dazed. She wanted to stay like that, but forced herself up. As she did, she saw that she wasn't the only one affected by the blast. Near the crater of the blast, there were several Borons lying on the ground, their bodies burned and charred. Next to her, several Borons were recovering after getting knocked down by the blast, still in a trance, though a few almost seemed to be coming out of it. Above, 2 of the larger craft broke off from the group and landed near them with a thud, while the other 3 stayed in the air, keeping the smaller craft distracted. The 2 Golden Ones started shooting at the front of the craft as a ramp opened up at the back. Several people wearing silvery masks covering their faces spilled out of the ships and fired back at the Golden Ones. She watched as the Golden Ones were overwhelmed, their golden armor now peppered with blackened holes and dents. Once the Golden Ones were down, the masked ones started guiding the nearest Borons into their ships. The Borons, many fully now out of the trance and confused, let themselves be pulled by the masked ones. One of the masked ones wearing a long white coat turned to her and grabbed her arm. She tensed. Did she want to go with him? She didn't know anything about these people. Where would they take her? What would they do to her? Anywhere, anything, is better than here, than this, she told herself. She let herself be pulled toward the ship. She walked up the ramp, and when she stepped inside, she gasped in surprise. The air in the ship was cold. She immediately started shivering, and the masked one that brought her there gave her his coat for warmth and sat her down in a corner. She gasped again as she felt the cold metal floor. Another masked one with a large bill ran out of the ship and started yelling, "Ground troops are coming! Take whoever you can and go!" He ran back into the ship. "What's our count, Will?" The masked one that was taking care of her took off his mask, revealing short black hair and a crooked nose. 4 Borons and a human. I'm not sure about the other squads. The other one removed his mask, revealing blonde hair barely a millimeter long and a stern face. "Try to keep them calm," he said, clearly referring to her and the Borons. "I'm going to help Carol get through that blockade." He ran out of the room, leaving her with the human, Will, watching over her. She turned to the other 4 Borons, who were also shivering and glaring suspiciously at their rescuers. For the first time, she noticed that 2 of her rescuers weren't human. There was a tall woman wearing a metal breastplate with a blade and small plasma arm at her waist, but her skin was yellow, and rather than hair, she had tentacles that reached her waist. The other one, who was wearing a black cloak with a hood, was the same, except her skin was dark purple and her tentacles just barely reached her shoulders. Besides them, there was one other human watching over them, this one with dirty blonde hair that reached his neck. He was inspecting one of the Borons, a plasma arm to his side. One of the Borons started reaching for the plasma arm and he snatched it away, keeping it out of reach. The ship shook slightly, making the Balerions tense. She heard the man who left earlier yelling from the cockpit, sounding distressed. The ship shook again, and she started to sweat despite the cold. Would she die here, so soon after being freed from that place? The ship shook a few more times, and then it went still. A couple minutes later, the blonde man came in, looking somber. How many made it, Will asked. Besides us, 4 Redders. All the others were either shot down or were grounded and swarmed. Will's lips tightened. The blind man turned to the 4 Balerions, his back to her. Hello. Can any of you understand me? He said slowly. None of the Balerions moved. They just stared at him, eyes blank. She started to rage to keep the fact she understood them to herself for now. She didn't know why they were asking. She glanced at Will and saw him looking at her hand. He noticed, she thought. The blond man sighed, seeming disappointed. My name is Jeffrey, he said while making calming gestures. We have rescued you. You have nothing to fear. You are safe now. The Balerions just stared at him blankly, having no idea what they were rescued from. She, however, understood what his words meant. You are safe now. She sighed in relief at those words and wept.
Nice.
Good. Real good.
All right, so funny thing. Aspiring writer over here has his own Discord server. Me and him have actually been using it recently to go over our respective books or creations or whatever. And we accidentally discovered something. The opening to both of our books is basically the same.
Yeah. Wait.
Let's see. Brown-skinned girl wakes up.
Yeah. By coincidence. Sounds.
Let's see. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Brown-skinned girl wakes up for something. She has absolutely no recollection of herself or what's going on. And some guys in ships comes in, and she goes with them. So, yeah.
It is.
Oh,
it
great
is
minds think alike.
Yeah,
great
it is
fools seldom
uncanny.
differ.
I mean, the execution is extremely different. He split it off into 2 chapters. I have it all condensed into 1 giant chapter, so...
I like making things big, my friend. I can't do small.
Fair enough.
A man after my own heart.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can't really do small either.
Yeah.
You can try making me, and then I'll end up making a 80-page book into a 300-page book.
Count Balerion of House Tatters. No, cannibalism is not in mine. However, somebody does get fed over to dogs, however, but I'm not going to specify who, and also that's kind of spoilery because it comes in the later acts. So,
then clearly Aspiring Writer has the better book already, though. He has cannibals.
Well, legitimately,
conclusive.
Well, legitimately, my thought on doing this was like, how do I make something worse than the fucking Holocaust? I was like, cannibalism.
That's one way to go about. Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah, holy crap.
Fuck.
God, what is wrong with us this week?
I don't know.
Dang, I'm kind of excited to do mine with like child kidnapping. Effing and indoctrination.
I torture a child every week. How is it I'm the good guy here?
Oh, hey, Raptor.
Hey, in my defense, cannibalism is technically fine in desperate situations.
Technically.
No, it's never
still
wrong.
taboo.
No.
It's still taboo.
How did you manage to shark? Yeah.
What did you all think of that? Because that was my prologue in chapter 1.
Okay, so what?
I'm definitely interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I mean, I really liked it. I really liked it when he was going over it in Discord, and I think something that I wouldn't do is that I wouldn't have the words "everything is perfect" and whatnot physically repeated several times in the actual text. I would just have I'll just mention that those words were on loop in her head.
Well, it's supposed to get you just immersed into the feeling.
Yeah. I get it.
Besides,
it's a personal preference.
Whatever it is, it can't be much worse than flicker. Flicker, 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 flicker,
God,
flicker.
no!
What?
Oh Lord.
I don't even know what you're referencing with that one.
Is it Wheel of Time?
Okay,
or-
so
Child, how I envy your ignorance.
Oh, is it in Wheel of Time?
Yes, the flicker is in Wheel of Time.
Oh,
Oh dear.
I still have to get to that series. My bad.
It's totally fine. It's daunting. It's
Mm.
14 books, and
15.
each one is about half to the length of the Bible.
Well,
Oh my god.
I've read every
Nice.
Cosmere book except White Sands, so
Mm.
I don't think I have an
Nice.
excuse when it comes to size.
That works. Anyway, on that note,
so shall I begin?
oh, that would be horrifying.
Well, if you
Oh
don't mind,
dear.
if you don't mind, I did have a recap written out because I thought it would be helpful for anybody who is unaware.
I am very sorry. I didn't give our new people the chance to introduce themselves to the chat since as this is their first time. I am so sorry.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah, sorry. Aspiring writer, you first and then Wizia.
What do you want to know?
Like how did you get into writing? What do you like what are like your primary enjoyments of writing and what are like your hopes going forward, like about like what you want to do with your writing career, or like,
Okay.
if you want to make it a career.
So, how I got into writing, I had a really bitch English teacher for most of my school years who made me hate the subject with an utter passion, despite the fact I still read as a kid. And then I had another teacher who gave me a creative writing assignment. I was like, oh, hey, your writing's pretty good. It wasn't, but meh. But yeah, after that, it's just like, ooh, I this is a part of English I like. Maybe I should try taking this more seriously. And then, I write a fucking 60 to 80,000 word book for an assignment that he wasn't expecting more than like 2,000 or 3,000 words. And yeah, now several years later, I'm still writing books and throwing them in the trash to restart them again. What was the second question you asked?
Just what you how can we like I guess like what do you hope to do with like writing going forward? Like, do you want to publish something, or what do you hope for?
I hope to publish something. I would like this to be my career, considering I like it. My favorite aspect is world building. It's the thing I'm best at. And let's just say there's a reason Oathbringer is my favorite book in SA. Just a lot of world building in it. That just makes you like, yes.
Oh no, I completely get you. World building is one of the most fun things to do.
Yes.
Yeah. Especially when there's military technology involved. At least for
just
me.
everything, magic, military, just fucking. I have so much useless world building notes in my fucking campfire file, just because in case I need to use it another day. Most of these aren't planned. They're just like, let's see. They might become useful.
You use a campfire notes, dude. I just have it all in my head.
I write it down. I write down.
I have to write it down too.
I tried doing that. I don't like doing that, so I just do campfire.
Yeah.
I don't use campfire actually.
I was trying to do false elitism, but you know.
Well, I do have Word doc notes as well, just for things that aren't just other stuff for my story.
Wimps.
Yeah.
Notepad plus all the way.
Wait, what?
Notepad.
Notepad.
Oh.
No.
Notepad.
That is
not Notepad plus.
Nice.
So you
how
write
is it
your
different?
Hold on, you write your story in code?
Yeah. Markdown.
That's
hardcore.
Hardcore.
That's a hard flex right over there, buddy.
Oh god.
Left over from that 1 year at comp sci.
Damn.
Real men compiling console bitches.
I gotta tell you, I feel inferior right now.
You're using more coding and programming than me, somebody whose literal job involves both of those things, and you're using it for side projects and hobbies. Nice.
I must bow down to this mastery of writing.
God damn, Carl, you're out every time you come on, you're out here making us look like fucking chumps.
Yes, you are.
Now I need to restart my book and write it all in code.
I think that's bad. I only recently switched to Markdown. I used to write it in .fb2, which is like an SVG derived format.
All right.
But I've become more sane since then. I've gotten to just Markdown.
That's a word for it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, that's totally sane.
Alrighty. Well, I believe it is Wizzy's turn. Please introduce yourself. I don't know if you've read your stuff. I've read your stuff before, and I think you were probably expecting to be savage, but it was just like, yeah, it's actually pretty fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's my cousin was just over here today, and she said, yeah, that's this imposter syndrome for you, but that's besides the point. Anyway, how I got into writing is pretty straightforward. Long time ago, there was this Korean MMORPG, and some guy was writing a fanfic, and he shared it in the guild's website. And we were using Engine at the time, and I was reading through it. I'm like, you got a lot of the world building wrong over here, buddy. But you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try making something even better. And then that is how it got started. This 6-year-long project of me mixing in Star Wars, Bionicle, Warhammer 40,000, Doom, and this RPG into a massive hodgepodge to see what comes out. And thus far, I am going with the working title of the Phoenix Rising series, or with this particular entry, I know it's not great. But this particular entry is called Calamity, and honestly, no name could best describe it other than that. My hopes is that this will actually somehow be good and or successful to some degree, that I can actually get something out of it, and I could just go and maybe even create a little community around this cute little story over here. I say cute. Who knows? I don't really know where I'm gonna go with this. I have planned out like 3 other books after this one to finish up the entire story, but yeah.
A worthy aspiration, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. I'd say so. And I think you're off to a good start.
Oh, thanks. Anyway, now that it is my turn, I actually would like to read a little recap that I'd written out. So, I'm gonna get started. Fair warning, the actual chapter itself is pretty long, so I'll try to make it as quick as possible. It was 3016 when Rosa's world ended. Earth had long ago lost contact with its extrasolar empire, meaning there was no one to hear humanity scream. They came in like a fiery hammer, immolating in a wrathful conflagration. Armageddon left in their wake. Yet standing against the dragon and his legions rose the phoenixes, 8 women born with immeasurable power. They stemmed the fiery tides of the legions, buying humanity time to prepare the Ark, an underground structure to rebirth the species. The phoenixes were placed in stasis, deep within the bowels of the machine, standing guard over the future of the human species. There they lay, slumbering, praying that they may awaken with their memories intact. Act 1, Chapter 1, Awakening. Closer, child, a voice called to her. A young, pink-haired girl got to her feet and stood up. She was in a cave, one that was dry and dark. She stroked the wall next to her, feeling its unnaturally smooth surface. Her eyes were drawn to something, a sudden flash from a small, bright, and searing hot flame. She kept her eyes on it, hearing the slow playing of a piano, a steady melody rising in tension as she approached the flame. Then she heard him. his voice dark as the cave and as youthful as herself. You have nothing to fear from me. Fear is like this fire. Lose control, and it shall consume you. The flame burst out, consuming the world around her. The child's now an adult, one laying on an asphalt road. Her body was barely clothed and covered in still bleeding cuts. A metal clanking rose in loudness as an obsidian, horned, golden-trimmed figure emerged from the flames. His dagger-shaped eyes glowed a bloody crimson. Her face contorted, tears streaming from her eyes as she called out in defiance of him. You liar! You never cared about us! You were just looking for an excuse! The draconic metal monster drew a black saber. I thought I told you to stay out of my way. The blade ignited, wreathed in a golden light, before he dropped it down on her. She jolted and gasped, waking up just in time to see the liquid drain past her neck. The pod's door opened, and although her body ached, she managed to move her limbs outside the container, grabbing onto the rims. She pulled herself out, took a step outside the pod, her high heels wobbling on the slippery ground, causing her to lose balance and stumble over. Still wet, dripping, and out in the cold, dark blue chamber, she shivered. The woman rolled over to sit upright and move her long pink hair away from her eyes. She looked at herself, gagging when she saw her attire. The material was black and leathery to the touch. She had gloves that reached past her elbows and what looked like stockings in a decorative T-shape over her pelvis. Her breasts were barely covered by a strap running around the back of her neck. Instinctually, she wrapped her arms around her chest. What the fuck is going on? What is this outfit? She began to lose her nerve. Her ears twitched. She heard a masculine voice, sending goosebumps throughout her body and nearly froze her in place. The woman looked in the direction she heard it, finding a strange man whose skin was an extremely pale purple, with hair and pants black like the urban night sky. He was muscled and average-looking, yet he seemed just as unstable as she is now. She checked to her right, spotting a black sword with glowing pink teeth on either side and a pink glowing orb built into the crossguard. She picked it up and got to her feet, not breaking eye contact with the stranger. His lips seemed curled in, and his eyelids looked forced open, his shuddering significantly more visible than her own. The man spoke, with the tremor of his body present in his voice. Hey, babe! The woman, feeling warmer now the last of the liquid had dried off, kept her tone smooth and assertive. Hey, she paused, checking behind him. What's going on here, and why am I dressed like a hooker? Pfft, he dismissed. You're my sexy warrior goddess, and he placed his hand on his chest, am your new commander. A smile grew on his face, his lips stopped curling, and his eyelids stopped twitching. The woman noticed his eyes were focused on her chest. And come on, you look great in that. Cocking an eyebrow, the woman unfolded her arms, taking another look at her outfit. The first thing she noticed was the patches of cherry-colored rose designs placed on the black leather. She even had a pair of pink glowing rings around her thighs, and small hexagonal boxes with glowing domes placed on the rings, gloves, and chest. A shimmer caught her eye, a metallic pink necklace with a heart-shaped locket. She picked it up, brushing her finger against it, feeling what must be scratches on the back side. Fine, she groaned. It's not like I got something else I can put on. She returned her attention to the man. A detail flickered in her mind, a word that he chose to use. Wait. New. What does he mean by new? Not wanting to contain it, she voiced her curiosity. Hold on. New commander. What happened to my old commander? The facade broke. The man was back to stammering. It was then that she felt it, another pair of eyes trained on her, watching her. The air felt strange, cold and blistering at the same time. Her eyes darted to a dark corner where no light was present. She felt grumbling in her abdomen, the hairs on the back of her neck sticking up. A vicious predator was stalking her. Yeah, his eyes shot around like he was trying to remember lines from a script. Oh, he wanted me to watch over you while he's gone. Very important business, you know? The woman didn't hear him. Instead, she focused on her growing sense of dread, almost reaching paranoia. That's why he's acting so weird. Someone's out to get him. Maybe he knew my previous commander, but something happened to him. What if he's afraid they'll come for him next, and that's why he woke me up? It fit together in her head, yet she couldn't ignore the fact that his eyes were still focused on her body. But that doesn't change the fact this guy's definitely a pervert. But it doesn't mean he deserves to die. She let out a sigh, placing a hand on her hip and not letting go of her blade. Don't worry, whoever's after you, I won't let them do anything to you. The man, dumbfounded by the words, became still. There was a sudden sense of calm about him, like a child tucked into bed by his mother. He began to smile again, yet it felt more sincere than before. He shrugged and swung his arm, beckoning her to follow. All right, come on then, he said, the woman following him. The bronze-skinned woman felt a tug and looked behind. She spotted 8 pods, 7 of which were empty, with the one next to hers containing yet another woman. Her breath was taken by her pure beauty, long black hair like the night sky, and clean skin. She was bustier and paler, yet looked too much like herself. The young woman continued on, walking through the door, with a question pecking at her brain. Who is she? She stepped outside, her body freezing up and the pupils widened. Outside the room resided a gigantic purple metal ravine, with sloping walls on either side, funneling down into a valley of sorts. She looked up and found it didn't get any brighter as she looked up. The walls lined with pods very similar to her own at the lower level and were slowly replaced with the glass windows the higher she looked. One thing was for sure. Wherever this place was, it must have been buried deep below the ground. Multiple bridges spanned the facility, connecting one side to the other. A monorail traveled from the wall behind her to the far end of the place. Drones flew above her in the air, too far away or quickly to discern their shape. Abruptly, she heard her commander call to her. Hey, Toots! Elevators this way. Raising an eyebrow, the woman turned to face him. Toots? Who the fuck calls people that? Wait, did he just catcall me? Her commander stood neutrally, yet not doing anything offensive, and almost appeared startled by her sudden vicious glare. She realized her hands were heating up, and that her blade had caught fire. The woman loosened her grip and took a deep breath. Whatever. Guess he probably just doesn't know any better. The fire went out, and she walked up to the glass elevator shaft as it arrived on station. The glass doors parted and allowed them to step on board. A hollow projector displayed the name and floor number of the door. Currently, it read Floor 49, Stasis Chambers. The woman squinted her eyes, trying to read it. Unfortunately, the elevator started moving before she could read it. Eventually, it came to a stop, reaching a level labeled Commander's Quarters. All right, here's our stop, her officer told her, waiting for the doors to open before stepping off. The two walked across the catwalk, the woman's body heating up as she became more anxious. Thankfully, the entrance to the commander's quarters was placed right next to the elevator. She followed him into the dark blue halls, her eyes darting around to find anything of interest. Why is it so quiet here? Why is it taking so long to get to wherever we're going? The woman's eyes panned, noticing several doors to either side of the hallway like the hallway of a hotel. Her commander stopped in front of yet another door. The woman heated up and clenched her fists. I swear to God, if it's another hallway or elevator, I'm gonna lose it. Her patience was finally rewarded as her commander reached into a pocket and pulled out what looks like a key card. She looked up, spotting a sign that reads Linen Volta's Quarters. She looked back at her commander and noticed the light purple skin. So, your name's Linen Volta? Why does that make sense? Her ears twitched. She heard muffled groaning, and her eyebrows rose. She heard it again, several times. The groaning of women, young women, and all coming from behind this door. The volume of their voice fluctuated, some sounding more violent than others. What the fuck is going on? Her heart pounded and sweat formed below her hairline. Adrenaline pumped in her veins, tensing her muscles. Don't worry, everything's gonna be alright, her commander assured her. Looks like the others couldn't wait to get started. He smiled as he held the key card to the scanner. She was nauseous now, thinking of what could be behind that door. Linen's finger jolted. He reached to his ear. What? The woman shuddered, watching the color drain from his face. He's here? Already? She saw him glance at her. But, I haven't even... Linen grabbed her arm. Come on, we have to go. Now. Linen pulled, but the woman refused to move, her eyes still filled with dread. Not until you explain what's going on. I don't have time to, he yelled. Please, we can't stay. Those fuckers will murder us both if they find us. The woman yanked her arm free and raised an eyebrow. She saw his hysteric breathing and the sweat pouring from his skin. Fuck it. She nodded and ran with him down the dark blue hall. The air bashed against her mostly bare body as she ran through the corridor. She could see an emergency exit sign at the end, placed over an entrance to a stairway. She ran up the stairs right behind him. He frantically opened the hatch and the two stepped outside. I sure as hell hope I'm not making a mistake following a clicking sound disturbed her ears. Along with the paralyzing sight of gunmetal plated soldiers in full body armor with blue trims. Leading them was a man wearing a gold and white plated gear, standing in the center of the group. Unlike the soldiers accompanying him, he stood out in the dark of night and was armed with a blazing blue blade instead of a rifle. Furthermore, he had a glow, exaggerated pauldrons, and a cape-like item thrown over his lower backside. Having no time to absorb the situation, the woman stood bewildered by the sight of cybernetic armored soldiers in front of her. Their helmets lacked a visor, having what looked like lenses of cameras built into their helms. The armor plates were sharp, precise, and angular. Each of them was placed over a major muscle of the human body and sliding between and within each other. She could see blue and silver-colored aircraft behind the soldiers, vehicles resembling something like a mini Osprey. It's over! We have you surrounded, the golden-armored knight called, his powerful and broad voice sending chills down the woman's spine. Fuck, he's intimidating. Are these the guys spoken linen? Her eyes turned away from the vanguard troopers and back to her commander, who made no effort to hide his fear. Worse yet, the woman noticed the blue marker lights were placed squarely on her commander's chest. Haven't you heard? Love triumphs over all, her commander shouted defiantly. Yeah, a vanguard trooper shouted back. A serial raping wanka is gonna tell me what love is. The woman stuttered. She felt a spike of sensitivity across her body, forcing her legs closed. Her eyes panned to her commander, nervous sweats forming across her body. Did he just call him a rapist? The red flags flashed through her head. All of them occurred within just minutes of her waking up from the pod. Her body began to tremble. I swear to God, you better not be. She dreaded his response, splitting between giving him the benefit of the doubt and going off circumstantial evidence. He shouted back, his words sealing his fate. Call it what you want. I don't expect heartless monsters like you to understand. The woman lowered her weapon, feeling her chest empty. Her eyes swelled, yet her face didn't contort. Her eyebrows narrowed as she felt a fire ignite deep within. I should have known. Why didn't I promise this perv anything? Her grip tightened, and to the surprise of Linen and the vanguards, she stood between them. She saw his eyes shoot open, realizing now that she was slightly taller than him. The woman heard the golden-armored knight shout an order. "Hold your fire!" She didn't so much as glance at them. Her fiery gaze focused on the frightened Linen. With a voice like silk but seeming with contempt, the woman opened. "Linen, what were you going to do to me in that room?" The tension in his body eased, yet he continued sweating. He answered with a nervous laugh. I was gonna, make love to ya?" The woman's eyes narrowed on him, with a faint glow in them. She saw that his eyes were constantly darting to her chest, even now. "And if I told you no?" "Please," Linen replied, "like you would say no to a body like this." With a grin, the woman answered back. "First off, you don't know the first thing about me. Second, my eyes are up here." She swung her sword at him, unhinging it and revealing it to be a spiked whip, one that now burned the same pink flames that was in her eyes. He sidestepped, and her eyes shot open. He drew an orange glowing dagger, one that he immediately cut across her abdomen and stuck into her breast. Gritting her teeth together, she powered through the sudden burning across her torso. She bashed his head with the pommel of her blade, forcing him to release his blade and back up. He was open, and with a vicious grin grew across her face. I'm sorry, I misread that. A vicious grin grew across her face, and with a simple downward motion, she cut a steaming gash down his chest. The fight was over in a flash, Linen squirming on the ground like a worm, grasping at the steaming wound on his chest. The woman, catching her breath, could barely hear the vanguards run past her. Eyes shut and biting her lower lip, she reached for the blade lodged into her. Groaning and whimpering, she pulled the hateful blade from her chest, then examined it. The very metal of the blade itself burned brightly with an ominous orange hatred, one she vaguely remembers. "Get a medical attention! Now!" she heard one of the vanguards call as he examined Linen. She discarded the blade and looked down at herself, seeing the wounds had already sealed. The blood had evaporated, leaving only her unscarred skin. Curious still was that the pain had all but vanished. Her left ear twitched. Someone was walking up from behind. In one swift motion, she sprung into action. "Don't try it," she snapped, turning to threaten the knight with the tip of her sword. He didn't so much as flinch, even with her burning blade resting inches from his neck. He raised his arms, presenting his empty palms to her hand. I'm sorry, presenting his empty palms to her. "I simply wish to thank you for your help, young lady." The woman, blindsided by his sentiment, raised an eyebrow. "What?" It took a moment for it to register, but when it did, she lowered her blade. The knight reached for his faceless helmet, removing it and revealing the face of a handsome young man with a complexion like her own, his hair hair black as night and eyes fierce like a lion. "My name is Captain Malik Abdullah. I'm currently serving under one of the numerous vanguard corps of the United Systems Republic. I came to arrest this criminal, who you have subdued on your own." Confused and flustered, the woman found herself lost in his fierce eyes, realizing just then the knight was noticeably taller than herself. "Okay, well, he's not staring at my tits or acting creepy, so that's a plus. Guess I can always introduce myself and see where this goes." She blinked, scouring her mind for a name. Yet all that came to mind were roses in a pink moon. Rose? Moon? Moona? She lowered her guard, genuinely focused on trying to recall her own name. Malik's concerned voice distracted her. "Do you not have a name?" "No, just having trouble remembering it," she answered back. Malik's eyes glanced down and to her right. She raised an eyebrow, wondering what he could be looking at. "Well, how does Wisia sound to you?" Tracing where his eyes were looking, the woman glanced at her weapon. Blushing, she answered back. "Did you seriously name me that because I use a whip?" She saw the alarm on his face. We can always go for something else. No, Lucia interrupted. It's a nice sounding name. I like it, she said aloud. Actually, it's kinda cute. Maybe I should go along with this guy. She let the idea soak in her head and her curiosity won out. In fact, I think maybe I could tag along with you. I don't really got anywhere else I can go, she asked, seeing his eyebrows jump up. Well, sure, we have a spare set of clothes in the shuttle if you're feeling cold. Lucia's pupils dilated. Her faith was being rewarded by the second. Thanks, a subdued smile appeared on her face. What are we waiting for? That was long.
Worth it, though.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Really?
Mhm.
I'm gonna be brutally honest. I'm gonna be brutally honest. The tone for me was all over the place.
Yeah, figured.
It was all over the place, and some of the word choicing you used, I apologize. I can't take it seriously, and this isn't the kind of story for me. But I have absolutely no idea what you're going for here. For the first 10 minutes, I thought you were doing like this epic space thing, like, you know, a Warhammer-esque thing, a 40k, if you will. But then it turned into a hentai halfway through, and I'm like, where did the jump happen?
Yeah, I figured that there was something horrifically wrong with this thing.
Well, that's what editing is for.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, go back with you don't write especially if something takes a long time to get out, like me, it took me 3 years to get the first draft of my first book, and I still took a whole other year to hammer out the kinks. I was a completely different person when I started from when I finished that book, and it really showed.
Yeah, same here. It took me like a year to get the first part of one of my projects out, and by the time I was done, I was going back and looking at the first chapter going, "Oh my god, what the hell was I thinking?"
Yep, that was me after you guys read my prologue. I was like, "Oh god, this is shit. I need to fix this right now."
My
well,
best.
It is a certain thing. It does help to go back and look at it and look at the stuff you produced first with a mind that, okay, I'm taking a flamethrower to this whole thing. But on the other hand, if you trim too much of that stuff, it takes away from where you end up, because ultimately it's a much more continuous thread for the reader.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it could do.
Might have to stay just for the sake of the ultimate plot.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is essentially you need to pick a tone, man. You need to pick a direction, because once you know what direction you want to go, you can implement some of this other stuff, but you need to make sure you do it in a way that it doesn't distract from everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
seems like
there's
I think maybe just like a little bit more like examples of like maybe the dark stuff, or just see maybe like, since like I think Tarek is saying like it's a bit of a strong flavor, especially
what
like
I'm,
after like it's kind of been like nice and kind of like even, and then like abrupt strong flavor in the face and de-escalation.
Well, what I'm really trying to say is that specifically is what I mean by direction is word choice in something like this is everything. Because the moment you were saying things like toots, I'm going like, what the fuck?
Yeah, you see that over there, that was actually a recent change, because originally it was something completely different, but I didn't like what I had over there from before, and then I decided, fuck, I need to figure out something to replace this. Let's see. So something needs to happen to agitate her, and something needs to be a red flag for her. And I decided, to hell with it, let's have him catcall her instead. And that's what I decided on.
Well, here's what
I admit, though, it's a very, very unrefined piece in the chapter, and it could use so much more work.
Here's my suggestion to you though, because you're in, I don't know, future or something like that's the impression I got. You actually have a lot of space to work with here in terms of like made up words and things. That I'm just saying, like you have options.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
Like, you might want to take a step back and just try to look this over with a different eye, because I've been in a similar position to you, mate. I finished my first thing and realized that I was trying to clash two ideas together that I did not start with. I just need to take a step back to decide a direction and continue on.
Well, that explains why nobody's reading past chapter 1, so there you go.
Hey, I read past chapter 1, mate. Don't take away that.
I mean, most people who I don't ask, and so you can just share this stuff around, and most people have not read past chapter 1, so.
Yeah, well, I did tell you that that those word choices would be kind of a filter, and the fact like you're definitely choosing a particular audience with those.
Well, that's again the issue. The issue also becomes again with the word choice and the way way you're doing it. You're attracting two different audiences, but that's clashing. But I've already made that point. So again, find the direction you want to go. If you need to want to find a way to meld it, then somebody here can probably help you. But you need to pick a direction.
Yeah.
I think that like kind of just like having a slower transition into it and kind of like talking about like what the bad things that are going on.
Like for example, and this is just something off the top of my head. I'm assuming this is one of those posts like again, this is that 40K sort of thing where everything is shit, nothing's working out the way it should. You get
on this one particular planet, yes.
Okay, but this is the situation that everybody in this planet knows of, right?
Yes.
Okay, if I were to take that scene where he was looking at her chest, I would say something like, "What are you doing? Why, like she's going, will you stop looking at my chest?" I would have the character respond with something like, "Hey, I could die tomorrow. At least want to see some beauty today." Some that get the idea across, but keep it like in line with what the desperation of what's going on.
Yeah.
Or something like a backhanded compliment.
I thought that's what I just said was.
Yeah. That's
backhanded compliments work very well for that kind of situation.
Yeah, like pick a primary tone and then try inserting those when you deem appropriate.
Yeah. Well, like I said, all of this is
if you want to get a little bit more grisly, you could have him respond with something. She's like, "What are you doing?" He says, "What? Most of the ones I see are generally dead."
Fuck.
That is great.
That's good too, yeah.
Savage.
Oh my god.
Yes.
Tarek strikes.
When you do that line, you're gonna have to get rid of the harem.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah, I guess I could. I guess I probably should go back over there and try to figure out some of the tonal issues. Try to correct that, because lots of people have read over that. And I've asked a lot of people what they think of it, and almost all of them say, "Oh yeah, this is really nice. This is really good." I'm like, "Cool. Tell me what's bad about it, please. Compliments mean nothing. I don't need compliments. I need to know what's not working over here." And that's actually why I get extremely anxious every time somebody says, "Oh, it's good," because I'm thinking, no, it's not good. How can you possibly say that? There's definitely something wrong over here. Even I'm sensing it. I just can't put my finger on what it is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, sometimes you need someone to just outright tell you what the fuck the problem is.
Yeah, that's why I respect Tarek's opinion a lot, because he's brutally honest about it. I mean, everyone over here really is, but yeah.
One thing that I would say about it is I was slightly confused about like the woman, like kind of like, is this like a new character? Why is it saying like the woman? Like
because
angels, but it's the lead angel we got in the prologue.
Yeah, that is
So, like-
supposed to be the same exact woman. So, I
Here's
gave
the
I
thing.
gave away
Here's
some.
the thing. If this is the same person, then just use her name. Don't call her the woman. Use her name because we've
Yeah.
already been introduced to her. It cuts
Yeah.
out a whole lot of words too.
It does, yeah. In fact, one of my biggest issues when I go through editing is I realize, crap, I repeat a lot of words, and it's much easier when you name things. Like if
Yeah.
you actually give something a distinction. And here's another piece of advice that I've kind of taken to. If you're unsure of like a sentence structure or something, or you're unsure of how you want something to flow, honest to God, just pick up a book you like and see how they did it. Because usually that's a good way to help make sentence structure a far more cohesive thing.
Yeah, I mean,
And
the thing is, all the stutters that I had was not because of the actual text itself. It was more because I was getting really tired of reading it all aloud.
Oh, no. I wasn't talking about that. I meant when you're editing the piece, not when you're speaking it.
All right, yeah,
yeah,
I see that. As for because one of my cousins actually complained about the opening for the book, chapter 1 and the prologue. He complained that he had no indicator that this is the same exact character. As a matter of fact, he couldn't believe that they're the same person. So I decided to on core characteristics for the character that just transcends no matter whether or not she has her memories. And I decided to emphasize, elements of her design, like the necklace and her hair and her general looks, because she's the only one who has those components.
Well, wait a minute. So, you plan on changing her name, don't you? Like, there's Rose. She goes from Rosa to Wissia.
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. She forgot her name. She gets a new one for a little bit, and then she meets someone else who jogs her memory again, and she gets all her memories back.
Oh, so the new name is also temporary?
Yeah, the new name is temporary in the actual book itself. Like at some point in the plot, she will ditch that old name for her original.
Okay, my suggestion: ditch the Wissia name and just have this person know his name because of some file on them or something. Like they know they're there.
They don't
some...
have a file on her.
Why won't they? Is it impossible?
No, because they're not from the same planet.
But how do they know they're there?
Because somebody
saying...
it's a chapter 2 thing.
That's
all
know,
I'm gonna say.
You might want to just materialize that to be like, okay, the person knows his name. Just for
lampshade it for a little bit. Kind of lampshade it for a little bit later. I think might be a good idea. So that it doesn't. It comes so that way it comes up more the like you're aware of it, but then you're kind of like, just wait. It all will be revealed later. Just wait.
Yeah, that's what I was doing this whole entire.
Sounds from what you've been saying that this is going to be a significant thematic through line throughout the piece. So yeah, I would definitely lampshade it at the beginning, just to call a little attention to it, make sure people know what is going on.
Yeah, because we basically have a subplot in here, and the main plot, well, maybe 2 subplots if you are feeling daring, and the description of it, and everything has to try to weave together. Like this one book, I have been struggling with figuring out the whole thing and how it should all be pieced together, and I've just recently figured out a solution that I am satisfied with.
All right.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything, all the questions do get answered by the end of the story. So
also, I'd like to bring something up because you guys talked about Wissia's character not having her name for that chapter. My character also doesn't have a name.
I did notice that, actually. I did notice that. I went to ask, is that intentional?
That is very intentional.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
But the difference between the criticism we're giving for Wissia and the criticism we gave you is that we already knew the character's name for Wissia's story.
Yes.
Whereas you just have not named your character yet.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure we all caught on to that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Except
Okay.
maybe Dunn. I don't think he reads very much.
Nice.
Because that's something that I've had other people read my stuff, and one of their common things is the fact that they are annoyed at how many times I have to say she because she doesn't have a name yet.
That can be fixed with editing. Like, again, little is more, especially in writing.
Yeah, I went back and tried to remove as many as possible, but some of them were like, this is sometimes just the best word choice. This is the best word choice, so just use a few she's there.
All right, so I think it's Moth's turn, right?
Yes.
Yep, I've got a story.
I am illiterate. I don't listen to books.
Books are lame.
And I just do like dictionary into it, and I have somebody else read through my stuff before I edit it or read it, even though I'm not finished with it.
I like to imagine that every time you read, it's actually a recording by somebody else that you just play while you sit back.
He goes out for a cigarette break.
I'm imagining Jen listening to his stuff on something like Audible during editing.
I imagine. Well, cigarette break is metaphorical in this case. It would probably be more like a Pop-Tart break since I don't smoke. I'm terrified.
Fair enough.
Semantics, but we need to get to Moth stuff.
Yeah.
So.
True, we do.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So there it goes. This week's offering from Moth Master, the Master of Mantises, among other creatures.
What an unfortunate name, in all honesty.
He picked it. It's fine.
Yeah, but he's the Moth Master. Why on earth is he controlling mantises?
Yeah.
Among other things.
Fair enough.
Anyways, let us begin.
Sorry guys, I had to take a call.
Miss Northwater, Captain, ma'am, chirped a young voice from one of the bunkers. The captain's head turned to the dark blue eyes of a small Dumian moth with a brass helm with 3 diamond-like spikes on top. She noticed his bright, smooth brown fur, untouched by the filth of mud and ash from fire. The yellow waves upon his wings were not dulled at all, smoke nor dust. It was as though he had just been born on the boat itself. Northwater's eyes narrowed as Siren walked back out to check on their navigation. "Call me sir," the captain hissed. "And what is it?" She immediately noticed the moth's hands grab for his own leg fur in fear. She looked at the innocence in his face, but she could not bring herself to be kind, for war was anything but kind to them. "Sir," stuttered the young soldier, "when are we coming to the other land?" Northwater felt her blood boil for a moment. She hated that question, as she had heard it far too many times, although, admittedly, she perked up a little at his voice. He sounded more like a caterpillar than a grown moth. How old was this child? "We do not know. It could be days, it could be many a starfall, it could be spring before we get there. Who knows?" She gave him a frightening, scowling glare. "Why do you ask?" The soldier's fingers began scratching at his fur, and she became aware of it. He's so nervous, she thought. He started, but her gaze pierced through him. The shaking in his voice grew, and his antennae flattened against his fluffy back. I'm afraid, sir," he admitted to her with a sigh under his breath. The captain tilted a brow and squinted at his hands as he began plucking fur from his legs. Too nervous, she worried. How many hearts do you have, soldier? Snapped Northwater. The boy squirmed in his bed. 5, sir? He choked. 5? Are you sure about that? The captain's voice was like a dagger slowly turning in his chest. Because it seems to me like you only have 1. Like a giant, sir? He asked. Wait a minute. Northwater's mind went blank for a moment. Did giants only have 1 heart? It was one of the rare times the lady's eyes widened in shock, and her hands turned into fists. How do you know a giant only has 1 heart, soldier? She feigned anger towards him. I saw giants once, in a white room, he began to explain, as he looked away from her gaze. I saw giants' blood. The bed was red, and I saw white giants take something from the dead one. He remembered everything from that second night. The smell of metal that filled the room, the feeling of cloth underneath his legs and hands, the way the giants spoke. They spoke words unheard of by moth kind, despite having no mouths. The boy recalled seeing swords far larger than any moth, swords that could pierce their thick flesh. A bright cloth wrapped around the dead thing, and the slowing beating of what he came to know as the heart of the giant. He watched them take it to a strange box, and the cold air began to numb him. The last thing he saw before he fell unconscious was the word Barhos. Barhos. Northwater hated the way she felt to say it. What a strange word. I think it was where dead giants roam, sir. The young moth flinched a little as he noticed her hands turning into fists. And why did you not tell me this before? Hell, why didn't you tell any of us? She nearly grabbed his chest fur, but her claws nearly sank into it. I hadn't thought about it, Miss... Northwater, sir, stuttered the youth. What is your name, son? Northwater glared deep into his eyes. Atolo. Atolo Leatherbore, sir. He could not stop saying sir, no matter how hard he tried. The captain's brows furrowed, and her mind began to wander. Had she known that name before? Was it new? Were there no other Leatherbores that she knew of? Leatherbore, she mumbled to herself while staring off. Where are you from, boy? She asked as she put her hand on his shoulder. Atolo's eyes looked at the wooden floor, the lion fur bed, the cracks in between the boards of the walls. He was thinking hard, as though he couldn't remember. Kingdom of Man, Atolo finally replied as his gaze met hers. Northwater began to think for a moment. Then her left hand cupped his cheek and her thumb gently grazed his fur. You're from Yalund? Asked the captain. The young moth's stare turned away from her as he dug deep into his memory. 3 nights. It was all in 3 nights, and the first of which was spent combing the kingdom of man's taverns and inns, and in one, he remembered, a group of soldiers drinking and howling in laughter. The sound of a few plucked instruments, and jovial singing warming the hearts of those within. Atolo remembered how happy they looked, but the symbol upon their sword hilts and shields was nothing like what he had seen before. A magnolia. In one corner he saw a larger moth with simple clothes rather than a set of armor, and strumming something that the boy never saw before. It sounded rather nice, and the moth's voice was even nicer. Beside him was a tawny soldier who was asking the patrons for mugs of mead and ale as payment for some sort of bet they lost. One moth with dark fur to match her black cloak was chuckling at the two of them. Atolo watched while Northwater glanced at his legs. They looked more ragged than the clean fuzz she saw before, and thick clumps of plucked hairs were covering the bed and the floor. She snatched his arm with her right hand and squeezed it. She could not stand it any longer. The boy was going to tear himself apart before moonrise. Please. Her voice almost sounded like she was going to cry. Allow me. Northwater eyed a nearby chest, near a shelf, and she pulled out a key from her satchel. She had many of them, for all the chests on board the ship, and each captain had copies of them within their bags. She almost stumbled to the chest and bent down to unlock the chest, and from within it she tossed the young moth a pair of griffin leather gloves. They were a light tan color, slightly used, and a few stitches were undone from age, but the grey feathers around the wrist area were still on them, and that was all she cared about. They had to be worn. Take them and put them on, she whispered. It was unlike her to be this calm, but seeing as to how he was innocent no longer after witnessing the giant, she had to be. Atolo slipped his hands into the gloves, and immediately his mind thought of a payment, a retribution. He had to pay her back. It was in his blood. Wait, Atolo stammered as he slid onto the bed toward his satchel. But Northwater quickly slammed the chest shut, rushed toward the boy, and grabbed his shoulder. He nearly screamed, and he flinched as she wrapped her arms around him. Do not. The Hastaton buried her face in his chest in embarrassment. I require nothing back. Take them, for they are yours. In truth, they were never his, but the captain's father would not have minded his gloves being a gift for the youth, as perhaps he would have done the same. My lady, Siren's voice came from the deck. We have an issue. He sounded as though he were in pain, and a loud slump against wood was heard. Atolo perked up at the noise, and he almost got up from the bed, but Northwater's hand pushed against his chest. Stay here, she whispered. And she unsheathed her sword and ran out of the bunker room. The young moth watched with her, as a saddened look upon his face and his gloves began prickling at his fur once more. He noticed that it hurt no longer. Northwater's arms shot above her head as she walked from the room, and her eyes shut a little as the sun shone through the fog. Damn this brightness, she thought angrily. What is the situation, Siren? She rubbed her face and blinked. Her vision slightly blurred, but it began to become clear that blood was pooling at her feet. Northwater stepped back. What in the five kings? She cried out, as she noticed the body of a soldier with a talon pierced through their armored flesh on the deck. Siren was carefully petting their light blonde fur and holding their bruised hand as the blood became slimy and drenched in hemolymph. Northwater bent down and inspected the bloodied talon that was lodged in the soldier's chest. They're choking him. The captain's head tilted up in order to find the source, the owner of the glossed claw. Tell me, young one, what hath come here? Siren shook the soldier frantically. They leaned over, their hand reaching for him and gripping his arm. Hippogriff, the soldier gurgled. Hippogriff. They moaned and wheezed in agony as their thick legs stretched and their small wings fluttered. Northwater sighed. Her expression dwindled into hopelessness, and she turned to Siren, who silently shook his head. We cannot. The old moth's brows furrowed in anger. We shall not lose more than those from the destruction by water beast. What are we to do then, you old fool? The captain snapped at him. We cannot leave them suffering like this. She gazed down at the writhing moth on the deck. Siren's voice raised up at her. We cannot lose another life. Not this one, not any other. Now quiet, you bitch. Northwater was taken aback by his insult, and she felt the urge to strangle him. The dying crewmate groaned in annoyance and pain, and suddenly their large ocean blue eyes widened as a giant shadow swung overhead. Their hand managed to point to the sky before their body fell limp. There it is, Siren snarled as his head thrust back. He began to pull out his iron blade, but a large black talon came down from the sky and sliced him across the face. My eyes! Siren roared as his hands pulled from the moth to his head. My eyes! Screamed the old moth. Northwater snatched his wrists to force them away, and she gasped. It was true, and the wounds looked horrific. Across his face, his eyes were split in two. as though they were two moon halves in his fur. Hemolymph was pouring down his abdomen, and his body became tinged in gold and hairs that were clumped and sticky. What is it you see, Siren? Snorthwater tried to sound calm. She was still angry from before. Her blood was still boiling a little, but it was simmering down much more. She prayed that he could still see her. Dear Adath, I see nothing, my lady, the old moth cried out. I see the voidest of stars. His vision was black, and everything felt warm on his torso. His chest fur was puffed out like a frightened lion, and he began to howl. The voidest of stars! The darkness! His hands tore from the captain's grip. The darkness! He shut his aching eyes and opened them back up, in desperation to see. He staggered and stumbled across the deck until he collapsed onto his knees. It was the worst fate for a moth to have. As becoming blind was said to drive them into madness, they could never see the light of a warm fire, nor see the beasts that had come for them. They could never see sunfall nor moonrise, and all faith in the immortals would be shattered. Northwater sighed in defeat. There was no way out of it. Madness would consume that fool and either turn him against himself or against others. He would kill to see again, even if it meant enslaving his kin to be his eyes. She grabbed her blade and whispered to the old officer, "Forgive me, sir." And that's that.
All right, that was
Very
interesting.
Yay, moth!
Very Lovecraftian.
Yeah, very much so.
That was great, Moth.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting that like he's like able to use like really cool descriptions and words, and also like just the I imagine like it's some kind of evil magic spell that like is making them like see stars, either that or like somebody slashed his eyes out. I wasn't 100%
That
sure.
is what
It
happened.
is the eyes getting slashed out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was blinded.
There's a couple times I didn't quite get the voice inflection right. That's the thing with doing a cold reading. I can't. Sometimes I don't read far enough ahead, and I realize that I said something very snippily when the character should.
Well, that's what I was explaining. I was explaining this to, I think it was Aspiring a few days ago, that when somebody who isn't the author also doesn't read their own work, sometimes a lot of nuance is lost unless the author is there to give them direction.
Yeah, that's what you said to me about after Dunn read out my book. Just a little side note over there. Rosa does not have a accent. At least not, aside.
Phonetically transcribed accent.
Yeah. I think the only two characters.
Not coded there.
Oh yeah.
So she's not a Cockney.
Yeah.
Or a chav. Whatever.
I mean, the only two characters who I think get an accent, well, in the main cast is Angela and Maria, because
You're great at accents, Carl. God dang.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Actually, there's a thing that I really appreciate about what Moth does. He has pronunciation guides right at the top of his stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn.
That's a nice little plus. That's
nice going.
Well on you, Moth. I got to give you credit.
Yeah.
Also, I'm privy to this knowledge because I was talking with Moth about it the other day. My character's actually got a cameo.
Nice.
It was that scene where they're at I think it was a bar or some kind of pub or something. They were drinking. You had the black cloak, the one with the instrument, and the other one who's paying out a bet. Literally, it was Aviana, Tarek, and Mikhail.
How about that? We're already got our own crossover in the cinematic universe.
Yeah.
I was gonna
big thing, folks.
I was gonna save this for later, but I'm just gonna spoil it now. Yelasir or Yalasir, I can't ever pronounce the name because I don't have the phonetic. He shows up. He makes a cameo in my thing.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, we're starting the done cinematic universe at this point.
Nice.
Oh god.
Oh boy, that's gonna be quite interesting.
Well, don't expect a giant crossover between the Perion Chronicles, the Dragonlord Annals, the Dark Queen series, and
to hell with all that. I
Dark
want the
Champion.
Dragon Blaster crossover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crossover. Crossover.
Oh,
Don't you know that's how to be successful?
So
And teaches kids not to do drugs.
So crossover. Well, I was thinking that would be some kind of PSA about like a pansexual raccoon somewhere in Dragon Blaster, because like Captain Planet did it. That's totally not unrealistic.
yeah, crap. Sorry, Carl, I didn't see your private chat or message.
Oh, no worry, we got to it eventually.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's possible. I think that my tone would conflict wildly with Tarek's.
Dragon Blaster with Aviana and Count Balerion's communist rabbits. Call it Burrow.
With genocidal aliens and immortal human women.
That would be
Yay.
And I
funny.
still haven't debuted Conflict yet.
Yeah.
And at the center of it all, Stolos
Nice
trying to figure out how he can best manipulate this to.
No. I'm thinking Stolas is the Nick Fury here.
Yes! Yes!
Hello, I'd like to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative.
God, no. By the way, I want to say right now. I want to say right now, the freaking British accents were on par when you were reading that bit.
Very
Not gonna
on
lie.
point. Yes, very on point.
I envy those who can do a posh British accent because, well, yeah.
I
like
I
it.
can only do
vaguely.
Australian and not very well at that.
From watching lots of BBC television.
I can't do accents
Really,
at all.
anyone can really manage.
Okay.
But it just takes time and dedication.
Yeah.
Like in my head, I don't.
Oh, do let me know if I'm being a bit of an offensive stereotype.
Alrighty.
Or if I'm being an offensive stereotype of someone whom you don't quite like, then I will be, of course, willing to play that on.
It's all right. You're being a stereotype of Europeans, so it doesn't count.
Oh.
That is a bit of an insult, sir. I'm going to need to have you take that back. Or, sir,
sorry.
by Jove, I shall be forced to tut at you. Or write a strongly worded letter. And then you'll be sorry.
I've read some of Asterix and Obelisk, but
oh man, that was my childhood there.
Asterix and Obelisk?
Oh, I love those cartoons. Those are fucking great.
Tintin.
Oh my god. The Gauls kicking the Roman ass.
yeah.
Yes.
And the Roman omens are like drawn like, I don't know, like every stereotypical bad guy.
Also, have you ever noticed that the
They
Romans are almost?
It's wonderful.
Yeah. You know what? That's actually kind of funny because I actually accidentally ripped off the Romans when designing the structure of my villain's army. So
We all do.
yeah, I mean they are called legions. They have the word legion in the name, so you think of Rome immediately.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Alrighty, so
Is it a good thing that you guys barely said anything toward my shit?
I don't know.
Probably.
Okay.
I mean, I know that mine had to be torn a new one. So you know,
Like I said in the beginning, put the pen down. You're done.
Yep, I am.
All right. Anyways,
Yeah. I was expecting you guys to rip it a lot more than you did.
Well, they're well.
I'm
It was
sometimes
just getting
not.
started, and there wasn't really a whole lot that you could have done wrong to begin with. Because as far as what we know, what happened so far, we have girl in camp with alien species who is being psychologically enslaved by them, and all of a sudden, some guys come in, probably freedom fighters or resistance fighters, or even another empire for all we care, comes in and they break them out of the camp. So yeah.
So
there isn't a whole lot of there to critique yet.
Yes.
But I'm sure if we can perhaps continue this on another showcase, we might have some notes,
some additional feedback.
Yeah. Hopefully, Chapter 2 does not have as many tonal issues as Chapter 1 does, because, admittedly, that was always the weakest one, if you ask me.
Whose family is having an orgy in the background?
I think that may be mine. It's because my brother just kicked my dad's ass in Mario Golf. Apparently, that's a cause for celebration.
What?
Also,
Mario Golf?
At Mario Golf, yes, and this is a Blue Yeti, so I don't know why it's picking up stuff all over the place, but Dad is just they're going nuts for some reason.
Okay. So, a couple weeks ago, I took a poll, and I'm just going to share that right now. Please, computer, don't die. Please, please, for the love of criminy, don't die. But I did a little bit of a poll just to kind of see what people wanted me to read, and so this is overwhelmingly people said criminal stakeout for whatever reason, and then the next one was a single combat situation between two people, one with gravity powers and the other with ethereal powers. So since that one is the next one up, I'll read that. Whoever wants to, somebody figure out we'll have a tiebreaker vote between these other two. Feel free to vote in the Discord, and then the next week I'll continue with Battle of the Seven Suns, which is going to be the next book that I'm publishing. But in terms of this one, I need to give some setup for this one.
Hang on. This is coming up on my deadline, so I'm gonna have to bow out.
Okay, go for it. That's fine.
I'll catch it up. I'll catch it up tomorrow when I wake up. All right, see you later.
All right.
See you.
Well, I feel like I should probably get going myself while I'm at it, because A, I'm hungry. B, I'm extremely tired. C, I've got my work cut out for me.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Yeah. All right, later, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of setup, so this is actually chapter 10 in Queen of the Ashes, which is the fourth book in the Dark Champions, not Dark Champion, Dark Queen series. I have too many darks. They get mixed up in my head. So what has happened up to this point is basically the orcs and the called Uru. Basically, the land is split between two different orc and two factions, orcs and humans. The humans are kind of control most of the north. The Uru control the south. It's very different. It's very different. Don't worry. And one of the things that the humans want to do is they want to have some type of you actually won't. This doesn't spoil what happens in the other two. This is hundreds of years after the end of the third book. which itself is several hundred years after the ending of the second book. But what happens with that is the humans want to get dragons, and humans in this world turn into there are some people that dragons can turn into humans. So what they've decided to do is since most of them live around since pretty much all of them live in the Uru lands, what they decided to do is send raiding parties into the Uru controlled lands, kidnap the dragons but in order to cover it up, they take all of the children, wipe their brains and turn them into humans, and the turned Uru basically have kind of a second class nature in society. It's kind of one of the inspirations that I kind of took was the treatment of Native Americans certain Native American children by the Americans, where like they were supposed to like grow up civilized. That was kind of the idea behind it.
Okay.
And so the main character in this is named Kaya. She's a turned Uru, and she was adopted by a really high-ranking lord, and that her and her sister are treated really well, better than most. And she's actually like understands it because she actually was a baby when she was taken, like literally newborn.
Okay.
And so her dad died fighting the Uru chieftain, is the king of basically the whole kit and caboodle, and she's sworn revenge, and she's going after him, and she's joined the army specifically for that purpose. However, this war has been lasting for 18 years. It's been lasting for a long, long time. And so one of the king's brother, Molech, has decided we can't keep going. This is exhausting. And so he has decided to betray his brother to the humans in order to gain the throne, but also to end the war so that more lives are preserved.
Hey, Dan, I apologize. I gotta get going. Something just came up. I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. It's fine. But that is the current setup. So might be missing a little bit of context, but I think this will be fun. And that's the most context that I can give. But anyway, let me start. The battlefield was an almost entirely flat grassy plain. Kaya breathed in and out, swallowing down her fear, then doing it again and again. "You doing okay?" Theron asked, putting his hand on her shoulder. "It's going to be all right." She swallowed it in. Again. "Yeah, I can do this," she responded, voice somewhat shaky. Kaya took a deep breath, then summoned her massive sword. "If I don't make it, please tell my mother I love her." Theron nodded, bowed slightly. "I hope not to make good on that promise, but I will do it." Kaya laughed, but she couldn't help a bit of tension entering her voice. She swallowed again, then leaned her sword against her shoulder. "All right then, see you on the other side." "Good luck, girl," Kiana called. "Kick his fat ass." "Yeah," some of the other soldiers took the call. "Kick his fat ass." Squaring her shoulders, Kaya ran forward a few steps, then threw herself upward with an abrupt pull skyward. "Solomon, chief of the Uru," she yelled, "I challenge you to a battle of honor for the death of my father." Solomon's eyes narrowed at the sight of a silver armored figure flying toward him. He recognized the armor from a few days ago, the man he'd killed but was unable to take his artifacts. "What is this?" he asked derisively, glancing at his brother. "Looks as though I'll have another shot at taking that armor." Solomon shrugged. "Seems as though she wants to challenge you for killing the previous owner," he remarked, pointing toward the figure. "Listen." "Solomon!" the figure yelled as it crashed to the ground in front of the Uru horde just out of bow range. I challenge you to a duel! Are you brave enough to face me? Why is this human singling me out by name? Suleiman wondered, drawing his sword slowly. Molek shrugged. Who can say? He remarked, though his tone was strangely measured. Perhaps she wants revenge, and this is the only way to get it. Suleiman grunted sourly, and leaned his sword against his shoulder. Keep the army back. I'll deal with this upstart. Let me fight her father. Esther ran forward and put her hand on his armored sword arm. I can take her. No, little one. Suleiman reached over and took her chin in his hand. I will answer this challenge myself. Esther seemed irritated, but she didn't say anything. All right, she said quietly. Take her down, father. Suleiman patted her on the shoulder and charged forward. I accept your challenge, he roared. Kaya raised her sword to a ready position and dashed forward to meet her enemy. He was huge, even bigger than Molek. He was covered from head to toe in black armor, giving him the mass of a brick outhouse. Baring her teeth, Kaya roared wordlessly and threw herself in the air, then redoubled the ground's pull on her. Her sword slammed down toward the Uru's head. The creature raised his sword to block her strike, only to stumble backward under the force of the blow. Kaya took advantage of the stumble to slam her sword into the Uru's side. Abruptly, the monster swung his sword, an aura of black energy surrounding the weapon. Kaya deflected the attack with a wild sweep of her weapon, then flung a downward pull at the Uru's sword. The weapon resisted her gravitational attack, giving her an immediate sense of fear. That had been our primary strategy: manipulate the gravity around the creature, then throw him off balance enough for her to strike him. The black sword seemed to hiss and crackle as it swung toward her weapon, deflecting with a loud sizzling sound. Exhilaration pulsed through inside Kaya as she bashed her sword against her enemy. This was different than sparring. Then she had to be calm. Now a sense of unfocused rage fueled her to attack recklessly. She felt like she was moving faster than she'd ever fought. Snarling, the creature slammed his weapon against hers, then reacted with whip-click reflexes as she adjusted mid-strike swing to strike at her torso by leaping out of the way. He took his massive black sword in both hands, then swung at her. Kaya brought up her own sword to block, drastically increasing the pull of the ground around her. The sword crashed into hers, then halted, the creature's whole body quivering in surprise. Taking advantage of the momentary opening, Kaya slammed her fist into his face. Suleiman's faceplate and nose broke with a loud crack, throwing him backward. Eagerly, Kaya swung her blade toward the creature's neck, a roar of triumph coming from her mouth. Congratulations. Suleiman fought through the haze of agony from his broken nose and shattered cheekbones, eyes watered with pain as he quickly thought through what he needed to do to win. The girl had surprised him, but he'd been overconfident, underestimating her. Now he had paid for it. He drew on the power of his weapon, instantly healing both his armor and his body, then shifted into the Wraith world just enough to make him to become instantly incorporeal. The roar of triumph suddenly became a cry of surprise as the sword passed through him as if he were no more substantial than a shadow. Before his opponent could right herself, Suleiman reached down and grabbed her by the throat. Impressive, he snarled, but it won't save you. Then he began stripping away her life force. Power flowed into him, giving him strength and wiping away the pain of his injuries. A scream of pain ripped from Kaya's mouth as she felt the Uru tearing at something metaphysical inside her. She felt like she was being scraped clean of her insides. Though the pain was more mental than physical, for a second she blacked out, then she snarled, drawing on the power of her sword, then slamming a gravitational push into the Uru's unguarded face. Instantly she was freed from his grip as he flew backward, propelled by the force of the blow. Dropping to her knees, Kaya leaned heavily on her sword, exhaustion suddenly filling her brain. She'd been feeling fine before, Why did it feel like she'd run 100 miles? You are beaten, little warrior, the creature growled, advancing with his black sword in hand. Surrender, and I'll grant you a quick death. Brain still foggy, Kaya pushed herself to her feet. No, she whispered. I will not bend. I will not break. I will not bow. She hurled herself backward, pulling herself out of the way of the sword strike, then drawing on as much power of the sword as she could to heal herself. It only somewhat alleviated her feelings of abject exhaustion, but it was enough to keep her on her feet. She raised her sword at an angle, then pulled herself forward at 5 times the pull of a fall from a mountainside. The rage boiled inside Kaya as she struck forward, a burst of adrenaline surging inside her as she charged at ridiculous speed. Infuriatingly, the creature fuzzed to a shout just before her sword was slammed into it. Her sword clanged to the ground, slicing up a massive furrow in the earth as she swung it wildly to deflect a retaliatory blow from the Uru war chief. Kaya pushed through the haze covering her mind as she exchanged blows with the massive creature, feeling her life slowly drain away as she fought. It was as if he had stabbed her and she was slowly bleeding out, but there was no physical injury for her to knit back together. As her sword desperately deflected her opponent, she could almost feel like she saw something fuzzing in and out of sight just a few feet from her each time her sword met with her opponent's. Give up, the Uru bellowed, swinging his sword down in a one-handed arc, then bringing his armored fist around to slash into her stomach when she tried to deflect his attack with her upraised sword. She flew backward, tumbling over and over as she slid to a stop. Sword still clutched in a tight, if tenuous, death grip. No, Kaya tried to push herself to her feet, but failed to do more than drag herself up to a crouch. No, I won't give up. The hulking war chief, he stood over her, weapon to the side. You have spirit for a human, Solomon said, grudging respect in his voice. But even you have to know when you are beaten. You are depleted, exhausted. But even you, nothing can save you at this point. It's not about winning, Kaya said quietly. It's about doing what's right. Finally, leaning heavily on the sword, she stood straight, glaring up at the figure of death looming over her. Words her father whispered whenever she was scared at the monsters in her claws or under her bed played her head. Remember, Brown Eye, he said comfortingly. Your ancestors are all around you, and all you need to do to summon their strength is say a prayer. Then he told her the prayer, and those words reverberating in through her. Karayan Shimayas Mia, she whispered, straightening and holding her sword in a white-knuckled grip. Karayan Shemaya Erner, her grip tightened. Karayan Shemaya Brand! She roared, blasting outward with as much force as she could muster. As soon as the roar burst from her mouth, out the fuzzy someone solidified into a man with white hair floating in the air. He quickly put his hand to a card gauntlet in it on his arm, drew a card, then slid it into the rear of the gauntlet. As soon as the card appeared, Kaya felt something stirring inside in the back of her head. It whispered, strengthening the warrior. Instantly, Kaya felt strength pour back into her, even more powerfully than she'd felt before the fight began. The power of her push abruptly increased in power by a drastic amount. The Uru tried to fade to incorporeality, but the man placed another card in his gauntlet. Binding the Wraith, the words fell to her mind. The push slammed into the Uru and hurled him backward, his incorporeality vanishing as soon as his power struck him. He rolled on the ground, then came up with his sword raised. Impossible, Solomon whispered, planting his feet as if to get a stronger footing. How did you get your strength back so quickly? Kaya glanced to the side, noting the apparition was no longer producing cards from his deck. He was looking at her as if to say, I just leveled the playing field for you, but you're the only one who can finish the fight. All right, she raised her hand. Let's end this. She charged forward, sword held in a double-sided sideways grip as if she were preparing to hack apart a piece of wood. For my father! Molek's tension suddenly eased as the little warrior attacked his brother like a charging lioness. He'd been scared when his brother had taken her by the throat and she'd instantly become weaker, and yet she'd still fought. She's a real fighter, Esther remarked, watching the fight avidly. I'd love to cross swords with her. She smiled. Actually face opponent who's skilled enough to face me on her own. That might be something. Molek licked his lips. It was good that his niece was distracted. It would make what he was about to do easier. However, he needed to wait for the exact right time. What do you think, Gorak? He asked his battle leader. Do you think my brother can take her? Of course, clan chief. The other Urus said quietly. That was the prearranged sign and countersign they decided upon to signal it's time to get ready to move. Back and forth, the two figures clashed. One silver, the other onyx. The silver armored human often flew into the air, then fell downward at an impossibly fast rate, sword first. Solomon responded by hurling blasts of black fire toward her while in mid-flight. Just as this fire was about to hit her, she raised her hand, creating a strange circular energy globule around her. The fire blasts were caught by the structure, then absorbed. Solomon leaped backward, just in time to dodge a powerful sword blow. Kaya's sword cut a deep gash in the ground, then came up to deflect Solomon's counterattack. Come on! Get her! Esther yelled. Solomon looked back and nodded, then had to fend off a rapid series of strikes from his shorter opponent. She's possessed by the blood rage, Molek remembered, the red flecks in her eyes. Likely right now they were suffused scarlet. I'm sorry for this, he remarked to Esther before placing his hand on her shoulder. She frowned and looked up to him, then gasped as he reached his fingers around her neck and pinched in such a way that would immobilize her, but would allow her to make one last sound before she was knocked unconscious. A loud scream. The yell from the Urus ranks caused Solomon to turn his head toward the ranks just at the wrong moment. Kaya's sword slammed into his forearm, aided by several gravitational pulls. The armor shattered with a ear-splitting crack, severing the limb in one blow. Solomon screamed in pain, doubled over, clutching his stump as he huddled around his mutilated arm. It's over. Kaya raised her sword, preparing to lop his head off. Then he looked into her eyes, and she froze, hands still gripping her sword. The eyes were filled with pain, but there was a sadness and fear in his eyes. Please, he whispered, I just need to make sure my daughter is all right. She is, Molek remarked, striding up to him. She's not dead, but you will never see her again. Brother? Solomon whispered. What is this? This is me ending the war, he said quietly. I'm sorry that it had to come to this, but I can't let any more of our people be slain for no good purpose. He nodded to Kaya. Finish him. Kaya swallowed and stiffened her backbone, but she couldn't bring herself to swing the sword. What he'd said Ed played in her mind. I need to make sure my daughter is all right. What would have happened if someone had asked her father that question? Finally, after a bit, she backed away. No, she said quietly. I'm not an executioner. Molek rolled his eyes and summoned his sword in a burst of fire. Well then, he remarked, I'll do what you don't have the stomach to do. Molek raised his sword, and Solomon reached toward his weapon. Shakumnash Obandish, he yelled. Instantly the sword vanished, and he collapsed to dust before Molek's blade hit him. Molek snarled and turned around. The duel is over, he yelled. I am your new war chief. The Uru began bashing their weapons against their shield in acknowledgement of the declaration, but there was a sense of anger among them. And you'll do as you said? Kaya said quietly. Molek looked down at the ash pile that remained of his brother. Yes, I will. Thank you. Kaya dismissed her blade and turned away. You'll be a target now, Molek remarked. Keep your friends close, little warrior. You're going to need them. Kaya looked back, then nodded to him. I'll keep that in mind. The dark-haired girl heard the thunk from close to her. For a moment she tried to remember who she was, but she found nothing. Frowning, she tried to think of her name, but the only thing that came to her mind was Esther. Eyes uttering open. Esther. Yes, that had to be her name. Pushed herself to her feet and looked around. Where was she? Who was she? She rubbed her temples, trying to figure out who she was. Ooh, and where she was, then looked around. Next to her was a black-bladed sword without a crossguard, sticking straight up from the earth, twisted black hilt meeting the downward-pointing blade in a strange pattern. Slowly she reached out and took the weapon by the hilt. I wonder what you're doing here, she said quietly, resting the weapon against her shoulder, and began walking forward into the woods. Garth flicked his goad at the horse's flanks, urging them forward. Casually, he looked around the field toward the forest surrounding a small farm, absently touching the crossbow strapped to his belt. Bandits had become more common, bloody Uru savages as well. One could not be too careful. Something crackled in the woods close to him. Reaching by instinct, Garth unhooked his crossbow from his belt and strode toward the woods. Before he got more than a few paces, a pretty dark-skinned girl with scars running down along her face and bare arms strode out of the forest, a long power sword with a black blade in her hand. What the hell? Garth let out a surprised yell. The woman abruptly set herself into a combat stance, both hands on her sword, weapon pulled back, pointed straight at him. Who are you? She demanded. Name's Garth, he said carefully, backing away slowly, mostly to get some extra range at his weapon. What's yours? My name is Esther. She didn't loosen her grip on the sword. Where are you from? Garth asked, slowly lowering his crossbow to mean he meant no harm. She blinked and frowned, seeming to be thinking hard. I don't know, she said quietly. I just woke up in the woods with this sword next to me. Crestfallen, she lowered her weapon. I was hoping you might know who I was. Amnesiac, unless it was a ploy. Garth breathed out. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I've never seen you before this moment. Taking a deep breath, she rested her sword against her shoulder and started walking away. Well then, I'll leave you to whatever you were doing. Garth shook his head wonderingly. At least let me give you some food for your journey. She halted and looked toward him. What kind of food? Contentedly, Esther strode along the path, sword in a makeshift strap across her back, a small bag of egg of grapes in one hand. As she advanced along the path, she popped grape after grape into her mouth. They were somewhat soft, but they were still good. What a nice man, she remarked, sticking the grapes in the pack of food Garth had given her. A couple loaves of bread, a piece of meat, carefully wrapped in cloth were her provisions for the time being. He told her she needed to cook it by tonight for maximum flavor, because it would probably go bad shortly. She shrugged and kept on munching on the grapes. Where she was going, Esther had no idea. If she was to find out who she was, she had to keep moving. What direction didn't really matter. All she had to do was keep walking. And that's the end.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to give much unless you actually give me the thing to read, because I cannot absorb anything unless I read it myself.
No, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. Sometimes I have, I'm able to absorb, the general, beats of the story pretty well, but when I, need to give feedback, I like to have the thing in front of me.
Even for pleasure reading, I don't do audiobooks because I cannot remember them afterwards.
That makes sense.
Ouch!
Yeah, I can remember a book I've read several years ago pretty damn well, but give me an audiobook and I'll forget it within a day.
Oh, ow. Yeah. Ow, ow, ow.
Yeah, it is unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm planning on releasing this particular book sometime in August. And that's the plan. But I guess like yes. Yeah, essentially they're the dual protagonists. There's a lot of stuff that's been happening. Basically, this is a flashback chapter where through most of it we kind of are in like 20 years in the future from here. And Kaya, this is just kind of me filling in Kaya's backstory, because where she starts is in the first book is very different than where like you would assume she would go, and so this is me filling in the 20-year gap.
Oh, interesting.
Yep. So, and it's kind of like how Sanderson does Stormlight, where, but in this case I have multiple POVs in the past, and kind of like I want to kind of create like a sense of, okay, so the characters are here in 20 years in the past, but they're here 20 years in the future. How did they get there? And that's kind of what I wanted to do. And I just hope that like the action was good and like was easy to follow. Like that's kind of the main purpose, is kind of just like me indulging my my talents as an action writer, such as they may be.
If you want comments, just send me the doc and I'll try and give what I can.
Okay. Well, I will we'll probably end there. Thank you guys for coming, and thanks to all my guests for coming on. Thank you to aspiring writer Tarek, Wizia, and Carl Saylor and Moth for submitting their work. I think that we will call it good there. Thank you all for coming. Adios.
All right, goodbye.
Dun died. Oh no, Dun died.
He did.